The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Beaches, cottages, picnics, and barbecue. Summer gatherings include good food, and here in Ontario, delicious and culture meet a vast world of culinary possibility. That's what we'll dish about all week with Chef Joseph Shawana, author and chef Joshna Maharaj, author and journalist Anne Huey, and food writer Marie Fitrion. Tonight, how food changes. That's next on The Agenda in the Summer.
Marie, you said something to me that I thought was really funny because I said before we started taping that when it comes to cilantro, it's like you either love it or it's like, why is this in here? Take back that dish. And you said what?
I said I don't trust anyone who doesn't love cilantro.
How come?
Because it's delicious. It's the most amazing thing. That being said, all my in-laws all don't eat cilantro. They think it's gross, but I mean, clearly they're not eating what I'm eating. But it's actually a deficiency within your biology that makes you taste it differently. It tastes like soap for some people.
Yeah. So who is pro cilantro? And
I grew into it. If that's possible.
We're all good people.
As a kid,
We're all good people.
Indian family. My brother, I'd be like, Mom, why everything with the green stuff? But now, when I cook everything, right now, I'm in for sure.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about identity in our previous conversations, but I wanted to go deeper into it. Maria, I wanted to start with you. In your view, how is food a part of one's identity?
Food's a huge part of our identity. I think it's the collection of how you cook it together as a family, how you sit around the table together, how you enjoy it, whether or not you like cilantro on it. And all of these aspects kind of help create a sense of self, right? And I think, we talked a little bit about the lunchbox experience, but even going to dinner to other people's houses or having people come to your home for dinner as well, I think is really important to kind of share that cultural experience. And I think for me, at least, it's been about sort of deepening my Haitian roots and sort of looking for ways to kind of connect with others. When people have similar food types that they eat, and they're like, oh, in my culture they do this. Oh, in my culture they do this. And every culture has a dumpling, every culture has a soup, every culture has and you start seeing that we're really not all that different when you start peeling back the layers and start talking about those experiences. And I think there's a really great story about unification there.
Interesting you said that every culture has a dumpling because we have something called mandazi, and it's basically fried dough, and it's got a little bit of sugar in it, and it's delicious. I guess it could be called a donut, but it's just delicious. So
fried anything's delicious.
Any fried, this is true. You have me at fried. Yeah. Joseph, what about you?
Well, growing up, especially in a large household, like we had, when I was growing up, I had 3 older sisters living at home and 3 younger brothers, and a single mom. So we didn't have too much, and plus I right up until grade 4, I was in day school, so I don't remember much of my early childhood growing up. But after that, it was a very hard living in a way. So I'm brought this whole conversation down.
No, we want to know.
No, but it's what made me today, right? How to appreciate the food and to appreciate what you make. So I remember going to school with just an apple and 2 pieces of bread with margarine in the middle, right? So that kind of upbringing I had. But
so food was just basically to give you energy at that point.
Yeah, and it's just what we were able to afford. Yeah, together, right? And then that's when I started learning more, appreciating more about going out hunting and harvesting, and then having a freezer full of meat for the whole year, right? So especially in the fall, and then it was a whole time of celebration for us. But the main things that we would have growing up, it was just I remember my mom cooking outside. We built her this outdoor fire pit, makeshift cooking crate, and then we had these meals during the summer months for once a month kind of thing. And she would just be cooking everything outside, fresh break bannock right on the fire pit with big cast iron, pan, all the meats, everything was being cooked out there, and she was just doing all the cooking, all the salad, everything was done by her. And then she would just let everybody else just come and go as they please. And then that's where our whole family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, like we have so many cousins growing up. Like we have more now than ever. So we would just, it would just be a bombardment of just family. And that's what I really remember growing up and around food, is the whole family coming together around food, and my grandmother cooking around food. Like everybody, everything that we done together as a whole huge family is been centered around either my aunts, and my mom cooking, or my grandmother cooking when she was alive. Every time she would come home, it would just be a big feast, right? So, and when she lived here in Toronto before she passed, she lived in an old age elders home, and then about once a month you would just always smell like freshly baked bread as soon as you walk into the lobby, and her apartment was on the 3rd floor, and then that's when you knew she was baking bread. Everybody would be knocking on her door for a $5 loaf of bread.
She had a side hustle.
Side hustle. That would be her bingo money for the whole week, right?
That was her bingo money. Fantastic.
So that's how much centered. Like food is centered in my family. It's focused, and it just brings us back to those memories of her being alive and how she brought everybody together.
And what about you?
I think it's such an interesting question, because food is, like, what we eat is an expression of our culture, yes, but beyond that, it's so many other parts of, you know, when people look at me and they can see that I'm Chinese Canadian, and so they think they know what that looks like, you know, eats Chinese food growing up. But, you know, beyond being from a ethnically Chinese family, I had 2 working parents who worked kind of shift work, both, you know, were tired and were standing for long periods of time. And so when they would come home at the end of the day, the last thing they would want to do was to cook elaborate meals, you know? So the kinds of things that we ate at home were very simple stir fries, things that, you know, my dad could come home from work at, you know, 5:30, set off the rice cooker, and then have dinner ready in 15 minutes or less, you know? And that is as much, I think, a part of my identity and our culture as anything else. You know, I also was a latchkey kid growing up. I would come home, my mom would be off to work, my dad wasn't home yet, and so, you know, part of my culture meant that I would come home and eat fish sticks that I would microwave in the microwave, or we would make like a Campbell's soup, or we would make a Nissin ramen noodle. So all of these different kinds of parts of our experience, I think, make up a part of our culture as well.
I mentioned Nigella Lawson at one point, and she said how and what we eat reflects who we are. And Marie, you've said that food can connect us, unite us.
Absolutely.
What do you mean by that?
I think at the end of the day, you know, it's about representation. And so when you were in a city as multicultural as Toronto, whether or not your culture is represented in that food landscape tells you a little bit about sort of maybe how you feel about yourself within that landscape as well. And looking at grocery stores, even the grocery store aisles are also big indicators of where we are. And I hate that ethnic food aisle. I hate how it others
now. Yes.
It others everyone.
Change the name, but keep it, right? Like change the name.
Disperse it. Like,
disperse it.
Like,
put all the canned milk together. Put all the noodles together. It's
Absolutely.
cool, right?
Because you know what? If you're looking for pasta, you're not going in the ethnic food aisle. So what is it really telling you?
Exactly.
Ethnic is othering everyone that isn't European in the food aisle.
Brown people's food
Is-
aisle,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's really what they're saying. Yes.
And you know, especially in cities like Toronto, like there really shouldn't be any of that. And what ends up happening is that when those categories want to compete, really, like Hunger Games to get into the grocery store, they have one aisle that they can exist in.
Yeah.
What does that mean in terms of somebody like me or my children or whatever going into a grocery store and seeing themselves on the shelves? It limits that experience.
And also others, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Time. Even just thinking about my culture and the vast volume of spices that we use in our food, why does that have to be? Why can't that just be where all the other spices are in the store? Why does it have to be someplace different? Why? And from I know that there's lots of arguments saying that there's a convenience to the international food aisle where you just go there and get, but I was like, like for the negative impact on those communities, can we all just maybe walk a few more steps in the store? You know, like that's really the exchange. Maybe it's worth it for us to rethink this, right? It's interesting that the evaporated milk and the condensed milk are in one place, but the coconut milk is in another place, and we will not pay more than, you know what I mean? That's got to be cheap. Still, there's the other angle on it, that the stuff in the international aisle has to be cheaper and more affordable than the stuff. We will not pay $4.50 for that can of organic that's in the natural food aisle, where it's a whole other side of things, right? We want that $1.79, 99 cents situation.
Even the cheese, for instance.
For sure.
So one of the other words that I keep hearing when we talk about food is authenticity, right?
Yeah.
But if we're living in a time when ingredients are being blended, recipes are being blended, what about authenticity in food? How do we define a food as being authentic?
Well, this is a big question. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and ultimately, I think I'm going to land on the notion that authenticity is a bit of a myth, right? I don't think it is a real thing, because I think it exists as a bit of a fantasy that we hold, right? And it's simply like we walk by a Chinese restaurant and we see lots of Chinese people inside. We're like, that's an authentic, you know what I mean? Those people, their food, that's the place you want to go. But the truth is, the way my grandmother made a chicken curry is completely different to the way her grandmother made a chicken curry, by virtue of time and space and personality, right? The way my grandmother would not recognize the version of the chicken curry that I make now. Yet, I make this same curry that has, you know, my mom taught me how to make it, but the chef in me changed the cuts and the browning, and you know what I mean, I tinker with it a little bit. But, and I sell it as my brown face stands behind the pot of curry and everyone smiles, my authentic curry, when I'm a fraud. Like, there's not, like, you know what I mean? There's nothing authentic, like, it's completely different. And to this day, my mother will lean over my shoulder and be like, oh, you're doing it like that. Oh, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, what have I lost?
And also now there's sauces, right?
Right, this is exactly it. So authenticity, it's a thing that we want to believe exists, but I don't believe ultimately that it does exist, right? Things are so, especially here in Canada, in Toronto, where we have so many varied influences and our own makeup, right? Like just what you're saying, the beautiful combination of cultures that you've got rolling, that you're building a new authenticity, you know, I think, right? And there's a new version of it that is constantly showing up as generations evolve. But I don't know that we're ready to let go of it.
Why do you think that is?
I think that is the one benchmark we have, right? We want to go to a place that has an Indigenous name, and we want to see an Indigenous person behind that counter, and that makes sense for that. You want to come and have curry, you want somebody that looks like me, because there's a claim to authenticity, right? Yet, I will tell you, I have met many white chef pals who have learned how to make a searingly gorgeous curry. You know what I mean? And their chicken, you would not know that non-Indian hands made this thing, right? So which is more authentic? They studied, and they had a neighbor, you know what I mean, a Sri Lankan neighbor who would let them come babysit them in the you know what I mean, after school, and they learned by virtue of that. So that's, I think the way we cling to it is a fascinating piece. You know
Joseph,
what I mean?
do you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree a lot on that. It's we have this whole misconception of just because you're walking into an establishment that has that ethnic background in it, that with the whole general client base that's in there is all from that ethnic background. You see the chef, everybody looks the same, so you think that you're getting an authentic experience when you're in there. But I strongly believe that in order to get an authentic experience, you should be going to that place of origin. And even then, it's not even a truly authentic experience. Just like what Joshna said, it's that individual's interpretation on that dish, right? We, as chefs, we all put our own spin on something, even if we're trained and we do something in school it's done this way. You got to cut, basically you got to cut an onion this way in order to have this, right?
Right.
Or
do you have to cut it fast?
No.
It'd be great if there was a timer that was connected to you. That's cute.
Yeah. But it's very it's a huge question to answer, and in 20 minutes I don't think we can cover even a percentage of it. But it's for myself, if I'm cooking an authentic Indigenous dish, in order for me to achieve that, I have to go back home and cook from that area where I'm from, versus me opening up a restaurant here in Toronto and then saying authentic Indigenous foods, it's very confusing.
Is that a terroir ingredient thing? Is that about needing to go back to that place to get those ingredients?
Yeah.
Or is it about the version of you that emerges when you're back at home with your people?
I completely cook different from when I'm back home. Especially when I'm out in the bush. Me and my wife and my son, and we're just cooking out there. I'll occasionally just grab some stuff right off the trees or go out foraging and then put it on the dish.
Wonderful.
Or in whatever I'm cooking up. But even that, it's like I'm still using my training in doing that, my French training, right? The technique.
We can't turn it off.
No,
right?
no, you can't,
turn it
right?
off.
So, and if you want to get rid of that, it's very hard. So, I always think of losing all that is it won't be beneficial because it's so ingrained into us that we need that level of. I don't want to say sophistication because that's a wrong term to use, but we need that level of
knowledge, maybe, or
even that's. I don't think there's a word.
It comes
for
with value. Too much. It's very loaded with values, right? Because every time you talk about it, it suggests an improvement. Which is not the message that we really want to
Authenticity is also a little bit about context. So the way in which you used to do something. So let's say you used to forage a specific way, it's likely because the terrain was that way or because there was a need to do it at a specific time or whatnot. And then as society changes and improves, those contexts get lost. So it's like we keep doing it, but we're not quite sure why we're doing it. We're trying to do it like we did it, but we don't need to. And then that's what we lose. We lose the process, right? Like when we were talking a little bit earlier about fusion, one of the things that we talk about a little bit is fusion is not just the flavor, it's also a fusion of the histories. It's understanding the context in which each of these dishes were conceived, and if you're going to put them together, those stories should help each other. They should tell a similar story, right?
So is that, because obviously this has led to this conversation around appropriation. Is that the missing piece from, if you appreciate the history, if you understand where the food and the culture come from? Or like, help me understand that a bit more.
I think with cultural appropriation and that conversation around food, I think the whole conversation gets misunderstood a lot, first of all. I think that many people, when they hear of this idea of cultural appropriation in food, they immediately think, oh, this means that, Joshna, as a person with of Indian origin, cannot make tacos.
Right.
And somebody who is Chinese should not be selling pizza, whatever else. They think that, we're saying that they cannot share cultures, cannot cook, cannot prepare foods from other ethnicities. I don't know that anybody has ever actually made that argument. I don't know a single person that I've ever talked to who said, you should not cook a food from outside of your culture.
I think that it comes down to it, like for me and a lot of people that I talk to, it's like when you're thinking about cultural appropriation in terms of food, you're also thinking about culinary appropriation, right? So, but in terms of where I take the biggest offense is if there's a restaurant here in Toronto, that I'm not going to name names, but they're not Indigenous. It's run by a white person, white family, but they put Indigenous people in front of it to make it seem Indigenous, right? But they're profiting off of us, and I think that's where I see the biggest problem. But in terms of if we're cooking, let's say, if we're cooking at home or cooking for our friends and we want to try this new dish out that we've seen, whether it be on TV or on our phone or wherever, I think if you do the due diligence of learning the ingredients and where they come from and the history and the importance of it, and then you can understand on why those ingredients work so well together, and you can marry those two together, and then once you understand that, then you could go into your fusion style cooking, right, and so forth, because you understand both worlds. And but I just have a big problem when people put a monetary value on it and then sell it as something, and I think that's where
I think that's where it gets tricky. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Is where commerce becomes involved, is where profit becomes involved, is where credit becomes involved. Who gets to credit off of certain other cultures' foods? And I think the reason why it's of concern is because if we were in a society or living in a world where all things were equal and people from every culture or whatever ethnic origin were all competing on a totally level playing field, that's great, but we do not live in that world. We live in a world where certain faces, certain people from certain cultures are going to find it more difficult to, say, get a bank loan to open a restaurant, or to be able to borrow money to go to culinary school, or to be able to get favorable lease agreements for a restaurant space. All of these different things, you know, if you have a black or a brown face, you are going to face certain barriers that a person who has white skin likely will not face. And so because of those things, there is this inherent power imbalance at play. And so I think that's where things get complicated, is trying to do that sharing of culture, trying to profit off of other cultures without addressing that power imbalance.
Yeah, and I think it was said earlier, was like, history is written by the victors. So who gets to bring, who gets to go on a trip and then bring that food back and then claim it as, you know, I brought this here. And who gets to do that is an important question.
The one piece that I feel is important to add is, for me, it feels important, building on what Joseph said, connect to where this stuff comes from, the tradition, the history, and if it is not your culture, loudly acknowledge the fact that it is not yours and that you are borrowing or sharing or learning.
Inspired
right?
by it.
To me, the acknowledgement that is not yours is the key piece, right? The offense, the most offensive thing, is the notion that the global culture is just like salad bar available to people to just pick up and use the way you want to, right? I think that when you take the time to acknowledge that this is not something that's from your culture, but that you're super excited about it. I just came back from Poland, whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, and I'm gonna share this with you. That is the fuller piece of the story, because otherwise we get into Columbusing, you know what I mean? Which is the instinctual habit of colonizer tendencies, let's say, right? Where everything, it's ours, just take it, it's ours. And to me, acknowledging that it's not yours is a great way to separate that from the sliding into this sort of colonizer attitude.
I'm thinking that maybe someone's watching this and they might feel like, I just want to appreciate the food. I like this food and I want to make it. What's the right way to enjoy and serve food so that it's appreciated but not appropriated?
Maybe it's just humility, right? It might just be humility to be like, I have tried. This is one take and one moment, and I did my very best to do this the way I learned how from a book or a video or a real live person. It is just because, look, I talk about this so much with people. The glorious promise of this country is that we have the freedom to learn from each other, right? I've been in the kitchen with you and learned so much. We've done this. And I need to protect that. We need to protect that, right? That we all should have the freedom to learn from each other and to discover that panko is really the best breadcrumb butter. You know what I mean? Don't fuss with anything else. And Turkish yogurt is, you know what I mean? They figured it out. So we don't need to mess with it. There's certain bits like that. It's like, let's just use panko, right? It makes everything awesome. That's the sweet things that are available to us here by sharing, right? And we cannot lose that, right? That might be the thing that we have to define a Canadian food culture, right? Is this beautiful interconnectedness, right? And that our plates are so saturated with all those different bits. To me, that's a much more exciting thing. We just have to learn how to negotiate the humans, right? Around all of that.
Marie?
Yeah, I think a way to appreciate food as well is looking for ways to give back to those who are creating that food. So if you're in a grocery store and you're seeing like, oh, non-President's Choice, that might be the easiest choice. But maybe go look for if there's a smaller producer or a local producer that's creating that food within that origin from that country, and sort of ask them questions, get to know the entrepreneurs and get to know the businesses that are really creating those foods a little bit closer to home.
That's really interesting, because I've actually never thought about that. I thought that, you know, if you go to like a big grocery chain and they have the food that you could find at maybe a local grocery, that it's a way to introduce people to that food?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic's done some pretty incredible things in terms of allowing restaurants or forcing restaurants into creating more bodega style, where they have both product as well as food that they're selling. So a lot of times those restaurants that have specific cuisines will also create items that you can bring home, or they'll work with other chefs or other producers to create something. So, you know, thinking outside of the grocery store box and really looking for ways to bring that stuff home is, I think, a good way to do it.
This is kind of a big question. We only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to pose it to you, Joseph, and anyone else who wants to jump into it. Who owns food and who can do what with it?
I want to know what you have to say. Great.
Well, I don't think anybody owns food, right? Because it's a necessity of life, just like water is, right? So, but we live in a day and age where people profit off of food, right? And in order to own something, it's in my culture, you don't own anything. It's borrowed to you because you're only here for a limited amount of time. You leave something the way it was or in a better condition for future generations. So I grew up in a time, growing up on Manitoulin Island versus growing up here in Toronto, it's night and day, right? So up there, we only had one grocery store on our reserve, and other than that, it was like either getting like convenience foods like chips, pop, and stuff like that, versus coming down here where you have fresh fruit stands on every corner in every single neighborhood, and those people know everybody. But then you also have larger grocery stores at every single major intersection in the city. But if you were to really own up to the food, then I think that you have to think about how you can make that accessible to everybody as a whole.
Because what you just mentioned is that when you're back home, there's less access to food.
Yeah, you're given basically whatever the grocery store will put on the shelves. Yeah, it's still inaccessible to the foods of the world, I guess you could say, right? So I don't think that we don't own food, right? Like nobody will ever own mangoes, or nobody will ever own avocados, or anything like that. It's a cultural significance will actually claim the title on that, but I think that it should be shared with everybody. Everything should be shared amongst. We don't live in that type of world, unfortunately.
Well, that's exactly it. Part of the problem is that we think we can own food. Do you know what I mean? Part of the problem with the food system is that we have players who believe that they can own parts of that system, which is what is gunking up the works, let's say, right? Food is not a commodity. It's got to be a public good, right? And our thinking is what needs to shift about that, I believe.
Well, that's all for this conversation, but we've got 2 more conversations to go. And tomorrow, we're going to be talking about, our personal and spatial relationship with food. Some more to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our guests all this week are
Joseph Shawana, Executive Chef at Kokum on Manitoulin Island. Joshna Maharaj, Chef and author of Take Back the Tray. Anne Huey, reporter at the Globe and Mail and author of Chop Suey Nation. And food writer Marie Fitrion, who's also program manager at the nonprofit Foodpreneur Lab.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.